Walk us through this entire case if you would, Ashleigh. The details are absolutely fascinating. This is the Hooker mystery from the Bahamas. And honestly, it echoes several dark homicide investigations Mark has handled in the past, and cases I've worked too. It feels terribly familiar. Break down the timeline for us. Give a brief overview and share your professional theory on what happened. I'll stick to the broad strokes because I could dissect this tragedy for 20 hours straight. That is literally all I've been doing for the last 2 weeks. I've been tracking it since April 4th, when Brian and Lynette Hooker spent a seemingly normal day together out on Elbow Key. They're sailors. Pure liveaboard types. They called that sailboat home for 4 years, drifting everywhere. Recently, they anchored in the Bahamas around Elbow Key, grabbing a mooring ball over in the Marsh Harbor area. But they decided to leave that safe mooring ball, sailing across to Elbow Key, to spend a full day and night soaking up the beautiful, crystal-clear waters over near Elbow. They threw down anchor right in Pat's Bay. Afterward, they visited Tahiti Beach, enjoying that shallow, bright blue water for a while. And then they headed all the way back in their little dinghy. With a massive sailboat, the keel runs too deep for shallow water, so a tiny dinghy becomes your only ride. They hopped in that dinghy, motoring all the way from Tahiti Beach up Elbow Key. Eventually, they hit the Abaco Inn for a few late afternoon cocktails, 4:30 in the afternoon, on April 4th. Witnesses saw them ordering 2 Cuba Libras each, lounging casually around the resort pool and the local bar. This is where the timeline turns incredibly fuzzy. We have photos of Lynette taking pool selfies right before 6 o'clock. Brian is just hanging around the water with her, too. By 7, Brian is seen walking alone toward the dock dinghy. But he gave local police this exact story. At 7:30 p.m., my wife and I left the Abaco Inn in the dinghy. We navigated White Sound Channel, taking a left to turn south along Elbow Key. We were heading straight toward our sailing yacht, securely anchored out in Pat's Bay. But we only make it halfway out. He claims the sea was angry, my friend. Classic Seinfeld reference there. He claims they hit 2 to 4 foot waves, with the wind howling at 20 knots. Suddenly, Lynette just bounces off the back of the dinghy. He tries frantically rowing toward her, but a metal pin breaks. An oar snaps away. Now he struggles to reach her, getting pushed back continuously by the current, the tide, and those crashing waves. Keep those 3 specific details in mind. They become crucial later. He tosses her a useless little swim float, completely ignoring 2 actual life jackets and a heavy anchor sitting inside the boat. Then he somehow claims, "I lost sight of her behind the dark waves. The wind just kept blowing me away." That was it. I couldn't even hear her calling out anymore. But the factual weather report tells another story. 18-knot winds hit the opposite coast, while their side of Elbow Key was perfectly smooth as glass. A truly safe harbor, which is exactly why you drop anchor and park your massive sailboat on the lovely, calm leeward side of any island. So his entire dramatic tale about the screaming wind and angry ocean completely crumbles. They were only in 3 to 5 feet of water. You could simply get out and stand up. Plus, Lynette was a remarkably strong swimmer. It was 150 yards to shore, 1,000 yards to the sailboat. He tells one investigator she started swimming toward the distant boat, but he tells another detective he never saw her again, claiming total confusion about where she actually vanished, because it was supposedly so pitch dark. They left Abaco Inn around 7:30 at the latest. Sunset isn't until 8. I stood right there. I took a boat there. I sat there waiting for the sunset, just to see exactly what that darkness would look like. 7 minutes out from the inn puts him right at the exact spot where all hell broke loose. The time would be roughly 7:37, or maybe 7:40, still plenty of light. So his entire alibi is complete garbage. I can take you further from here, but I'll stop talking for now. Oh, keep going. Seriously, keep going. This is absolutely fascinating. By the way, Ashleigh, if you ever ask Matt about similar crimes, this perfectly matches his big breakout homicide case from back in the day. Where was it? Newport Beach. Exactly. Yeah. There was no body in that case. Yeah. Just touching on that. Let me give you some quick history, Ashleigh. When you're assigned to the homicide unit out in Newport Beach, the local environment feels strangely similar to this mystery, right? Heavy drinking everywhere. People rent little electric boats called Duffies to cruise around the harbor. I bet Mark has patrolled out on that water plenty of times. I've been out there so many countless times. boats constantly drifting around. And yeah, every once in a while, you stumble into a brutal domestic homicide involving a couple out there. There was one major investigation right before I officially joined the local homicide division. A wealthy heiress was murdered by her romantic partner. She had an absolute fortune, and just like this Bahamas case, the crime happened entirely out on a dinghy. They were supposedly water skiing. He claimed he struck her with the boat by accident, but a jury saw through the lies. He was prosecuted and convicted of murder. So, keep walking us through this investigation. But wait, I need to know, Ashleigh. Normally in these missing persons cases, as you know better than anybody, there is always another woman involved somewhere. Did that come up? Honestly, I do not think that is a factor here, and I only say that because they are liveaboards. They lived on a sailboat for 4 years. You are basically never apart from your sailing partner when you live at sea and travel the ocean together. That alone could make a person want to throw someone overboard. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Because this man, Brian Hooker, has a very dark history. He faces multiple allegations of choking her out. She fled the boat to her mother's house many times, saying she was never going back again. She photographed bruises across her back, sending them directly to a friend with a message. She wrote, "I am documenting these bruises because this is exactly what he did to me. The last time he pinned me in the cockpit and choked me out." He was actually charged with choking his 12-year-old daughter. He went to court, but a jury acquitted him. Many family members told me his defense team managed to convince the jury that relatives had somehow planted those false memories into the mind of that 12-year-old girl. But I have spoken to these relatives, and many say they were right there. Wait, is the 12-year-old related to the missing woman? No. That would be the husband we are talking about, Brian Hooker. It is his 12-year-old daughter. He later remarried Lynette, and Lynette also has a daughter, her only daughter now. Yeah. So, you have a documented history of severe domestic violence in this relationship. You mix in a little bit of alcohol. So far, we have all the common, dangerous ingredients you usually see brewing in a true crime tragedy. What happens? Yeah, tell us exactly what unfolds next. So, she supposedly falls off the dinghy into the water. What does he do next? He obviously dials 911 right away, right? Sure. Good question, Matt. Because he has a cell phone. And you might know this, but not absolutely everybody realizes this fact. Whether your phone has a SIM card or not, there is always a little message at the top that says, "Emergency calls only." Not everyone knows that. I would give him grace if he were not a former AT&T employee. Let us go there. He is a former AT&T telephone installer and repairman. He is a massive tech geek and brags about it. She bragged about how he wired the networking on that boat. And guess what? AT&T fired him for masking the location of his work van by tampering with the GPS tracking. This guy definitely knows electronics, and he fully knows a phone will connect without a SIM card. Plus, the phone would work anyway. You just end up paying much higher roaming fees on your American cellular plan. Big deal. Your wife is supposedly drowning, and you are desperately trying to save her. The very next thing he claims is that he tried to reach her, but just kept drifting farther and farther away. He says she went into the water holding the dry bag and the engine safety lanyard. The spare key was supposedly inside that dry bag, along with their passports, her phone, and other items, leaving him completely adrift with absolutely no engine power. He claims he drifted in the wind for 9 hours, finally landing on Marsh Harbor 4 miles away. Again, utter garbage. I have spoken to top marine forensic experts across America, professionals who have done all of the extensive mapping. They analyzed the tide data, wave currents, and wind patterns. Their conclusion was clear: he never would have ended up there, and it certainly would not take 9 hours. We ran a physical demonstration that I will share on my podcast soon. It only takes 5 hours. That is if those exact ocean conditions are replicated perfectly. Wait, so he cannot swim? He has absolutely no background with the water. What else do we know besides the AT&T job? Ex-Marine. Right, an ex-Marine. And I usually do not say ex-Marine, because as they say, once a Marine, always a Marine. But this guy, even with his Marine Corps tattoo, shows none of the morals or strong character of any United States military veteran I have ever met. So, he is an ex-Marine to me. Based purely on the absolute garbage lies he is feeding investigators. Plus, the fact he fled the Bahamas immediately, Right after promising everyone he would stay put until his missing wife was finally found. Not even 10 hours out of jail, he secures a brand new passport, and he is already on a flight out. So, yeah, tell us a little more about that. Yeah. Walk me through exactly what stage we are currently at in the official legal proceedings. So, the Bahamian police officially arrested him on day 5. Wait, hang on, let me count. He goes out Saturday night, then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So, roughly day 4.5. They pull him in for questioning and detain him, but no charges, while they quietly gather more evidence. Let me be absolutely clear about this right now. The investigation was a disaster from the start. The police failed to photograph him, seize his clothing, or confiscate his marine watch, a device specifically designed to collect the one thing they desperately needed: location data. They completely ignored his phone, too. Authorities held him in custody for the maximum time local laws allowed, but eventually hit a wall. They just lacked the probable cause to keep him. As an experienced sailing captain and swimmer, it took me exactly 5 minutes to see right through the details of this case. I do not even live in the area, but I knew instantly. His entire story was a complete and utter fabrication. Once the 72-hour hold expired, authorities had absolutely no choice. They had to release him. The very next day, he sat down for network television interviews. Secretly, he was securing emergency passports, while simultaneously looking right at the cameras and promising he would never leave until he found his missing wife. Yet, by the next morning, he had vanished on a flight to America. Today, his whereabouts remain a mystery. He could be hiding with family in Sacramento, or perhaps he retreated to Michigan, a place he used to call home. Look closely at these photographs from the network interviews. The visual evidence here is striking. This specific image is pulled directly from one of those tearful television segments we just discussed. Notice what is resting on his left wrist during the broadcast. Absolutely nothing is there. The marine watch is completely missing. When this footage first aired, it sent a massive chill down my spine. The implications were huge. Where was that specialized sailing watch? The device synced to an application, actively tracking and downloading his precise coordinates in real time. That piece of hardware held the entire truth. It was an absolute goldmine of digital forensic evidence. Now examine the second photograph. The crucial image where the device is actually visible. Digging through digital footprints is always a dangerous rabbit hole, but I just could not stop myself. The image quality is absolutely terrible, but it clearly matches a premium Garmin Aquatics model. A $2,000 piece of sailing gear loaded with critical GPS tracking data. So what exactly does the absence of this device tell us about his movements? The suspect actually owned multiple advanced smartwatches. Reviewing the investigative case notes reveals a twist. The device shown in that blurry photo might not even be the specific tracker we need. What remains certain is his primary watch connected directly to the ZEP tracking application, spelled out as ZEPP. Strangely, that is the exact watch he carried in his bare hands while exiting the jail. Police had simply handed back his personal effects upon release. He received his property back, but he chose to physically hold the device instead of putting it on his wrist. It screams consciousness of guilt. A man wearing a GPS tracker constantly, only for it to mysteriously vanish during an interview, leaving behind a highly visible, glowing pale tan line. He will likely never explain away that glaring tan line to anyone questioning the case. The visual proof was right there on his skin. Seeing the stark, unburned circle left by that heavy watch strap was genuinely chilling. But the story of this missing watch takes an even darker, more bizarre turn. Early in the investigation, the bare wrist and heavy tan line sparked a massive theory. Was it possible that during his initial chaotic arrest on the water, he was completely caught off guard when authorities boarded his sailboat to detain him? They secured him in handcuffs and began transporting him toward Freeport in Grand Bahama, aiming for a much more secure detention facility. And then, the unthinkable happened. He went overboard. He supposedly tumbled directly into the Sea of Abaco. The sheer absurdity is hard to grasp. He plunged in wearing a life jacket and clutching his personal items. Fully handcuffed, he ended up in the water, forcing Bahamian officers to dive in and execute a rescue. How such a breach of protocol occurred remains baffling. Honestly, the entire frantic man overboard scenario felt completely staged. Was this a desperate, calculated ploy to unbuckle his smartwatch and let all the digital evidence sink? Or maybe he was just putting on a chaotic performance to confuse the local authorities. A performance indeed. But falling from a police vessel is entirely different from the tiny motorized dinghy they operated on April 4th, surrounded by totally calm, glassy water. Conditions on the leeward side of Elbow Cay were perfectly still, not a single ripple. I keep coming back to this unsettling theory every time I picture that bare, untanned wrist. 5 agonizing days after his detention, he walks free. And he is casually clutching that very same watch in his hand, which fuels incredible frustration. The authorities literally had the prime digital tracking evidence in their possession, and they just gave it away. In their defense, any competent police force would have pulled a full digital forensic image first. It happens frequently in major criminal investigations. Detectives will quickly clone hard drives, duplicate location history from smart devices, and then hand the physical hardware directly back to the suspect. This tactic is especially common when operating under severe time constraints or during fast-moving preliminary inquiries. So how quickly did he hire a defense attorney? Right away, almost instantly. He hired a Nassau lawyer who flew straight to Grand Bahama immediately. That guy was out there feeding spin to absolutely anyone who would stop and listen. The lawyer set him up with ABC, CBS, and NBC. Just a rapid-fire triad of back-to-back network television interviews to get his story straight, which just shows how completely out of touch he was. Nobody watches those legacy networks for true crime cases anymore. They watch podcasts. They watch us. This right here is where the millions of viewers are if you actually want to control the narrative. Do you remember that movie Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks? The crew was heading up to the moon, and they were completely wired up with all those constant, heavy medical detectors. Then they staged that little rebellion, ripping all the sensors off. Down on the ground, the flight doctor panicked, thinking the entire crew was suddenly dying. We essentially live in that exact world today. We are all tracked. I am literally wearing one right now. I have an Apple Watch. Tell me, Ashleigh, did the victim have anything on her body that could help police figure out exactly what happened? She absolutely did. I have actually been searching for the specific brand name of his watch. I am digging through 100 pages of notes. I will find it eventually. But let us focus on her watch. This is a massive turning point in the story. Her device was an Apple Watch with a powder pink band. You could clearly see her wearing it in every single social media post. Her daughter, Carly, was just out there sailing with them, sleeping down in the V-berth, cruising along, having a completely normal trip. They were taking excursions. Carly noticed her mother wearing that pink Apple Watch, but the battery on that watch was terribly degraded. It usually died right before dinner, meaning it had to go straight onto the charger. Do not forget that critical detail. She placed that Apple Watch onto its charger sometime around dinner. Dinner usually hits around 6 or 7 in the evening, since the watch simply refused to hold a charge. We also have a photograph of Lynette taking selfies at the Abaco Inn. This marks the final confirmed moment anyone saw her alive. And in that image, she clearly seems to have that powder pink Apple Watch strapped to her wrist. But here is the major twist. The Bahamian authorities actually managed to do one single thing right. I honestly cannot list much else they got right. The forensic evidence is heavily lacking. They have not even bothered requesting security footage from the coastal homes facing the Abacos. It absolutely infuriates me to witness this level of negligence. But I digress. The investigators did secure an Apple Watch, straight from the suspect's boat. Apparently, it was left right there. The powder pink Apple Watch. I am not sure if they pulled it directly off the charger. I am not certain where exactly they found it. However, Lynette had openly complained for a while that the watch was barely functioning. So her husband, Brian, bought a replacement. But he did not buy an Apple Watch. He bought her a direct replica of his own tracking device. The specific brand completely escapes me right now, but it syncs with that ZEP application. And the band on this new watch was green. Knowing the Bahamian authorities seized a powder pink Apple Watch directly from that boat gives me incredible hope for actually solving this mystery. Because, quite frankly, I completely reject the story about her mysteriously bouncing off the back of that dinghy. Give me an absolute break. We are not idiots.